When I first presented this game to you, I called my video Dungeon Crawl Toolkit because it was very much a in progress game that I was sent by the designer who had reached out to me in an email. And here you can see his credit name here along with the back of this box. And as you can see now, it's made its way from a DIY situation to this is a prototype of the game, and it is going to be a Kickstarter in March of 2022. I will say from the outset, this is a different type of video than I normally do because I think I've only ever done one video on my channel that involved a Kickstarter game, and I agreed to receive this prototype from the designer and show you the components of it because I really like what he is trying to do here, and it mixes elements of very detailed pencil and paper dungeon crawling along the lines of D100 Dungeon with now elements of board game. This is a also an overland map that is part of the world of the game that you could travel through, and attempting to have the depth of pencil and paper dungeon crawls and RPG elements of developing characters alongside board game components. So this video is going to just basically walk you through some of the components that I received. I'm not going to make any characterizations about the quality or the composition of the Kickstarter pledge because I don't really know. I mean, there's some things stated in what I received, but who knows? These things can change. I'm just going to sort of show you what I was received and refer you back to the original video I did on this if you want to get into the details of the rules and how the game actually works. I'll talk about it a teeny bit here, but this is really just a component overview of a prototype I got to show you, take you along the way if you've been following this game. I will say two things that are important at the outset. One is that the name of the game is going to be changing to League of Dungeoneers from Dungeoneers. And second of all, something just from me, not from the designer, I think this is an awesome, awesome image for the box. However, I hope he changes it because this game is really meant to be played managing four characters. And I think this is misleading, to be honest with you. It looks great, but this is not what the game is. And I think if it's used too much to associate it with the game, it will mislead people who might want to purchase the game. That it clearly says right here in the rule book, the game is designed to be played with four characters. You may, of course, go for fewer or more heroes, but that will change the balance of the game accordingly, and you might want to change some of the game parameters to counter this. Well, the game already is incredibly complex, and you can refer back to my other video to see the level of that. So I think to rebalance it on top of everything, if you want to play one character, I will say at the outset, I think that would be just a lot, a lot. So just a note there, my only editorial note for this video, as much as I love this image, I do think it's misleading. All right, let's take a look here at the back of the box. Lead your party of heroes in the search of gold and legendary treasure into the dark and forbidding dungeons in the kingdom. Filled with monsters, traps, and other perils, these dungeons will test your heroes to the fullest. With skills and bravery, you will return with precious coin, gear, and magical items. So pretty standard, generic. It's an old school dungeon crawler with heavy RPG elements. True. Using miniature standees or tokens, your heroes will move through randomly created dungeons throughout the kingdom. Inspired by classics in the genre, this game takes the concept further, adding more details and an advanced combat system. Multiple attack options, special talents and perks, magic, alchemical weapons, and battle prayers. There are multiple ways of handling each combat. The dungeons are also populated with furniture or objects that might contain everything from mundane tools to legendary items. There's leveling up, gaining experience, etc. Now, I will say that as generic as this sounds for the genre, it's generic in a sense in a good way, and that I found that it picked up a lot of the kinds of things in this area of gaming that for me personally, make it very valuable. And it includes those aspects of details, customization of the character. Again, refer to the other video to see exactly how that's done. In many ways, this is based on also on a percentile system in terms of the stats and things like that. You can play a wizard, a rogue, a ranger, a barbarian, a warrior priest, or a warrior, and or an alchemist or a thief. You get character backgrounds, and there's also psychology. So your character has personality and can develop in many ways. The alchemist can gather ingredients and do potions. And I think in the video demo that I did, I had my alchemist searching for materials for a potion. And there are prayers and things. And of course, there are quests, and these are included as well. But what we're going to look at now for the rest of the video is the components that I was sent, the prototype components that are going to be different than what the pen and paper was, which is in effect was the rule book that I had with the dungeon tiles. And now we have a major change, which is the addition of cards. So for example, if you want to generate or find a room tile, you can pull a card here and you'll see a picture of the tile, which will be in the box, and you will have the description of the card and how you can interact with that room. You'll notice here that there's also a suit for like a poker suit here, because another way of generating the rooms is by using, there's a deck of cards here, and it's a standard deck of cards, pulling a card like this and then referring to the appropriate sheet here. And I don't actually think I think there's probably no king. I think I made a mistake there, but let's say we pulled in a 6 of clubs. We would refer to the sheet here and see what that would be. We would find this tile, read this, etc. And another way, again, of doing that is with the room cards like this. So we have the deck of cards for the room cards and the deck of cards that are the poker deck as a way of generating rooms. What's in your room? Well, monsters are in your room. And so there's cards with the monster stats on them. It will tell you for combat, it's important what type of monster it is, not just the specific zombie troll, but the category of the monster is important with the various stats, as well as its individual specific traits and things that are important for combat. There are reptiles, and again, they're all pretty much the same in terms of the back and what experience you get and their health value. We have beasts, of course, etc. And then some of that, like here, it'll just say see rules. So I guess you refer to, there is a bestiary, and here it is. And you can see in here the very the very lengthy, I guess I should say, possibilities with the monsters here. And there's the monster table is here with 100 different monsters that you can generate through random rolls as well, and the stats. So there's different ways of pulling in the monsters, but the big addition are these cards. There's also cards for travel events. You can see the map here. There's overland travel. I don't think, at least in what I have, Silver City is where you start out. I don't think that the other parts of this kingdom are particularly detailed, at least as far as I have seen, but I haven't really looked through everything totally. So you could pull in, as you're traveling, you find something like a blocked road, and then you can read the information on it and see what you do. There's also off-road travel events, so flooding. Heavy rainfalls turn the roads into nothing more than muddy fields, making any movement extremely tiring. This ends up delaying the travelers with 2 days. I guess that means 2 days. The party may not move next turn, but will have to eat as usual. I guess there are overland rule somewhere. I don't recall that in the book, but I didn't go back and listen to my whole video, so maybe it is there and I presented it. I don't know. Of course, you've got treasure as well. You're looking around for things, and maybe some of your treasure is good, and like this, a trap disarming kit. Normally used by thieves, these kits are also common equipment amongst Dungeoneers as well. It is a +10 when disarming traps. You could find some armor, for example. Looks like that's a lot of armor there. There's also wonderful treasure. Let's see an example of that. Ooh, a mithril weapon. So more things, and maybe you could roll a d4 to see what actually it is. Gives a little variety in the treasure found. Here's a plain looking book, but it's a training manual, and it will teach you one random talent. I think for me, in terms of where this game really is outstanding, is in this aspect of developing the characters and giving them specific things that they excel at, and the tinkering that you can do with those stats and choices that you make about what you put your time and effort into. There are weapon cards here, and you can see them as such. That's a basic armor card. And here's a look at where we are traveling to. These are objective rooms, as I recall, that you will be building your dungeon crawl using these tiles and fulfilling the objectives of the quest. And again, as a reminder, you can search the rooms, so the rooms are interactive. And there's all sorts of tiles and sizes and carders and everything that you could want and more in terms of putting this together, following the quest, or really building something on your own and pulling in just random tiles on your own to create an evolving story. Because again, as I said, with what makes this distinct for me is the fact that I was really getting rich character development, and the characters were differentiated in terms of what they could do and the skills that they had. And oftentimes in games of this genre, the promise of that, I think, is better than the execution. And here I felt that the execution really excelled. Now, to have that happen, the flip side of that is there's a pretty heavy rules overhead with this game. This is not, I don't think, a pick up and bring it to the table quickly kind of game. And I don't think it's a pick it up and gather 3 friends and start playing, because there is a commitment of developing the character, understanding the rules, and then as you play through, referring to the rules. And that is just, I mean, it's not just with this game, it's with any game in this genre, that I think that what draws me, and probably those of you that are watching this video, to this type of gameplay, is the promise of feeling like you're living in the world, or almost feeling like you're playing an RPG with a GM who's describing a room, and you get to look in something, but trying to model that as in this case, as a kind of board game, or pen and paper hybrid board game. But to do that, you need to have the references, you need to have the rules. Speaking of which, the game comes with, or the prototype I got comes with, some reference cards. Now, you can see just from, again, looking at this card, this is the level of detail that is here. And I got 2 different versions of, I think, the same card. So maybe there's an experiment on the design, and for my purposes, this one is much easier to read. The combat psychology and loot. These are the summary of the rules, actions you can take, modifiers, what you would roll on to see what type of loot you're getting, things that have to do with morale, that you're tracking morale, and what the impact of a character failing at a terror test, or a character dying, or a miscast spell would be. Again, basic summary, but basic in this game, you can just see the level of detail. There's threat rolls in combat, door traps, room traps, So I think this is just two different design choices in the prototype that I received. But this is enough to summarize what I was saying. I think that the the modeling of travel through dungeons to complete quests with characters who you develop is excellent. The flip side is this, that you have to be referring to these types of charts and tables to figure out how you're going to actually enact the rules of what is there to allow you to live in the world and impact the world. There are tokens that are presented here that will be used to track things like acid damage or if there's a spell effect. This has to do with combat and getting ready with a weapon. There's a fire damage token. These are just a few of the ones that condition tokens. Here's a poison token, and helpfully it tells you right there on the token as a reminder of what the impact of that would be. And there are some standees that I was sent also, some sample standees. We got a different image on the front and the back for this guy, and just looking at some of them here. Aesthetic of it is pretty dark, so it is printed in a dark manner, and I think that is meant to be, I don't think that's just necessarily the prototype. I think that it's meant to be that kind of dark. That's the feeling of this world, is a perilous dark one. So that's a quick look inside the game that's going to be published as League of Dungeoneers, and it's exciting to see how it's developing along the way and still retaining the core of what makes it unique, which is this development of the characters and the realization of almost a three-dimensional world and actually creating the sense that you can travel through and do things in that world in a mixture of a pencil and paper dungeon crawl and now these board game elements.